Welcome back, my poets. Today we're talking about editing our poems, which is how we take something like this, one paragraph with minimal punctuation, and turn it into something like this, a poem separated into stanzas with properly spaced lines. I'm going to be going over the basic rules that I personally follow. These are not things that I have been taught. These are just things that I have learned when formatting my own poems for books. Hey, by the way, I have poetry books. They're all available on lulu.com when you search AC Ham. That's me. You can also find them on my website, abbyhamauthor.online. Yes, I just remembered to do that. abbyhamauthor.online.com. That's my website. It's brand new. You can check out all my stuff there. Now, for this one, we have this like long run-on sentence, and it would make a decent scene, but what we're going to do is we're going to separate some of these sentences into fractions of themselves. Talking's hard, you guys. In order to make them spaced out and to make it look more like a poem. Again, not every poet does this. In fact, I have a couple poems that I have published that don't look like this, but it is the general style that we think of. Rules. If you are formatting on Google Docs or Word, add a space before paragraph. The more spaces you have between your lines, the better separated they look altogether. Second, if you are using a rhyme scheme in your poem, separate by rhyme scheme. So if you're doing A, B, separate with the A line and the B line and the A line and the B line, or the A and the B and the B, and etc., etc. When separating stanzas, I typically separate by thought. This poem in the book that it is going to be published in actually isn't separated by stanzas. I have it as one long flowing thought because that's just kind of the vibe I wanted. But when you read the poem, you'll understand, okay, this is me talking about the past. This is another thing. These both start with the same sentence, no one told me. So those are two separate thoughts there. The next one, it's not the same amount of lines. These are 4 and this is 6, and this one I think is 8. This one is the next train of thought. Here's how the problem gets worse beyond these two basic thoughts. And then this is the like train of thought is I didn't ask for this, I didn't ask for this, I didn't ask for this, I didn't ask for this kind of type thought. All of those are together. You could also do those as individual lines if you're feeling dramatic. Because again, there's no rules when it comes to poetry. I'm just teaching you the guidelines in case you want to apply them. Next, after you have separated your stanzas into thought or scene or the way you need them to be separated, treat it as you would a normal sentence. So for me, personally, if I have separated a sentence in half, so for example, I have, no one told me that just because my brain fathomed it didn't mean it would happen. Instead, I would sit, hiding under my covers, shaking with fright, afraid to go to bed each night. So these do have rhymes, but they're not separated by each sentence. It's not each full sentence is where it ends. So I have fathomed it, didn't mean. Because this is still a part of this sentence, I have not capitalized didn't. This is something that is up to your taste. Most people want all of their sentences capitalized, even if it is part of the same sentence. For me, having to edit all of my own poetry books, this helps me. How would I treat it in this paragraph if it is part of the same sentence? Would it be capitalized there? That's when you're going to capitalize it. Also, using things like ellipses, which is what we call the little dots, or an em dash, which is what we call like a really long version of like the dash that you would use. It's like 2 dashes instead of 1. That is a great way to separate thoughts together. There's also the semicolon. I'm not here to teach you the semicolon. I don't know if I actually understand it. And these are actually things you can Google, because Google is free, y'all. So for me, this line right here, no one told me when I was little and scared of my room when I kept imagining creatures in the dark gloom that just because I could picture it didn't make it real. What are we doing here? So no one told me when I was little and scared of my room, and this is a separate thought that continues on that first thought, when I kept imagining creatures that were in the dark gloom. I would use an em dash here. I have regular dashes because this book is not fully edited yet, but I would use an em dash here, which is the longer dash. You could also do, I think a semicolon would be appropriate, but do not quote me on that. Commas might be appropriate, but I like to separate it out. It's also where, if this was like in a book, you would probably use parentheses, but we don't use parentheses that much in poetry. We can. We just don't because they don't look pretty. They kind of look goofy. And poetry starts with a P and pretty starts with a P. It does not start with a G like goofy. There's no logic to my thought here. Have you noticed? I hope you've noticed. Now, this sentence, that just because I could picture it didn't make it real, continues. Instead, they tucked me in and told me I had to deal. I would have a comma after real. This is one thought, and then second thought, connected. It could be a separate sentence as well. Again, it's going to be up to preference. Grammatical preferences goes into poetry. If you get an actual editor, like just let them do all of it for you. Now, there's sometimes things we do when like the words aren't technically right, but we needed it to rhyme. And that's okay. That is the freedom of poetry. That is the creativity freedom that you have. Let it do what it needs to do in that moment for you. Now, how do we do things like non-rhymed poems? Non-rhymed poems, you can do as much as you want. I try to keep, when I'm writing it down, the same about size of each paragraph length. I don't want it to be like a 15 syllable and then a 7 syllable and then an 8 syllable and then a 12 syllable line, because it's still not going to flow. Just because you're not having a rhyme doesn't mean there can't be a flow. But again, it's up to your preference. But I would personally recommend that you try to keep some sort of cohesion between lines. If you are doing an atypical structured poem, which means you might just have your whole poem in a paragraph, that's fine. That's absolutely allowed. Again, anything is a poem. People can look at a tweet and say that's a poem. They might be wrong, in my opinion, but that doesn't mean they're technically wrong. The way you structure your poem says more about you and your style than it does about like you as a person. It's not like, oh, you have a paragraph poem? Boo, B-. It says more like, oh, okay, this person likes to write what is not technically a story, but is a poem, but they just haven't formatted the way that most people format their poems. Again, rules, they're not really necessary, but they're recommended, and sometimes they're helpful, but they're not necessary. Next, formatting your titles. If you are like typing up poems, I always recommend having your title bigger and either bold or italicized, or my personal favorite, underlined on the document that you are using for your poem, so that people can look at it and say, this is the title of the poem. Another way to help with this is to use quotation marks. I've done that for some of my books, or to add another space beneath and make the font size bigger. For me, I type in an 11 font size when I'm doing poetry, but when I do the titles, I put them in a 14 and I underline it, so that way you can tell this is the title of the poem. If you're wondering for book-wise, a lot of people do one poem per page of their book. I write too many poems for that, and I don't want to, charge you for like a $30 poetry book. So if I have like a small poem, it can go on the bottom of this page because this is a medium-sized poem. That's my thought on that. When do you use italics? Great question. So glad you asked. Italics are best used, in my opinion, for emphasis, the same way with like a regular book. So if you're writing something goofy, use emphasis to be like very, very, very. Or if someone's being dramatic and you really want to punch a word, that's what I think of. Not like punch like a huh, the word, but like you really want that word to like have more of a bite to it. That's when you would use that italics, italicizing, in that sentence. So for a sentence like, so-and-so was a beautiful girl, you could say so-and-so was a beautiful girl. You can say so-and-so was a beautiful girl. Italicize the word beautiful, and now you have a little bit more of a punch and a bite. Things like that. We don't usually do bold or underline in poems, but I think if you're typing up italics, it's something that's like, it's not gonna like be too jarring to your audience, but it's gonna get your point across. And that's just my personal thoughts on editing a poem. If you would like more details, you would like to see what I am talking about, I can absolutely do a follow-up video. Just let me know. More videos here. Subscribe over here. Check out my website, abbyhamauthor.com, and I'll see y'all next week, poets.